50 years ago this week, in November 1964, FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover told a group of reporters on the record that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was, quote, the most notorious liar in the country and a danger to the American way of life. And their attempts to discredit King went far beyond just calling him a liar. The FBI placed bugs in King's hotel room, tapped his phones, bugged his apartment in Atlanta.
The FBI has 14 filing cabinets full of eavesdropping data on Martin Luther King Jr. 64,000 pages of this data was released to the Senate, and it was labeled obscene. Not classified, but it was labeled obscene. Now, this eavesdropping data showed the fact that he would go to these cities where he would have these speeches. He would hire all kinds of prostitutes and have orgies in his hotel room. A Baptist pastor, the wonderful, moral, civil rights leader, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was hiring prostitutes in city after city and having perverted orgies in the hotel room with these prostitutes.
Today, the New York Times Magazine published for the very first time a full, unredacted letter sent to King in 1964, which until now has only been available to the public with significant redactions. It's an utterly shocking document. The letter accuses King of being, quote, a filthy, abnormal animal who's engaged in sexual orgies at odds with his claims to morality, with dirty, evil companions, male and female, giving expression with you to your hideous abnormalities. The truth is that it was really written by one of J. Edgar Hoover's own top men, William Sullivan, the head of the FBI's intelligence operations, who, according to Tim Weiner's History of the FBI, had a package of the King's sex tapes prepared by the FBI's lab technicians, wrote the accompanying poison pen letter, and sent both to King's home. Sullivan's letter ends with what seems like a call for King to kill himself. King, there's only one thing left for you to do. You know what it is, says the letter ominously. There is but one way out for you. You better take it before your filthy, abnormal, fraudulent self is bared to the nation. How did you find this thing?
I really just happened upon it. So the letter itself has been known for about 40 years at this point, but we've only seen it in these sort of redacted versions. And I was going through a new set of Hoover's official and confidential files, which were really the secret files that he kept in his office. They had been reprocessed. They had finally been turned over to the National Archives, and I was amazed to see this letter there finally with all of the redactions removed.
Now, I've got a copy of the letter right here. This is the letter that the FBI sent to Martin Luther King Jr. In view of your low-grade, abnormal personal behavior, I will not dignify your name with either a Mr. or a Reverend or a Doctor, and your last name calls to mind only the type of king such as King Henry VIII and his countless acts of adultery and immoral conduct lower than that of a beast. No person can overcome facts, not even a fraud like yourself. Lend your sexually psychotic ear to the enclosure. You will find yourself in all your dirt, filth, evil, and moronic talk exposed on the record for all time. I repeat, no person can argue successfully against facts. You are finished. You will find on the record for all time your filthy, dirty, evil companions, male and females, giving expression with you to your hideous abnormalities, and some of them to pretend to be ministers of the gospel. Satan could not do more. What incredible evilness! It is all there on the record. Your sexual orgies. Listen to yourself, you filthy, abnormal animal. You're on the record. You have been on the record. All your adulterous acts. Your sexual orgies extending far into the past. This one is but a tiny sample. They sent him an audio recording with the letter. You will understand this. Yes, from your various evil playmates on the East Coast to others on the West Coast and outside the country, you're on the record. King, you are done. The American public, the church organizations that you've been helping, Protestant, Catholic, and Jews, will know you for what you are, an evil, abnormal beast. So will others who have backed you. You're done. King, there's only one thing left for you to do. You know what it is. You have just 34 days in which to do it. This exact number has been selected for a specific reason. It has definite practical significance. You're done. There is but one way out for you. You better take it before your filthy, abnormal, fraudulent self is bared to the nation. So guess what happened? He didn't kill himself. So guess what they did? 34 days later, they gave it to the media. Guess what the media did? Total media blackout. No one would print it. No one would report it. This from the Washington Post by Richard Cohen. Let me just read for you this article entitled, "What if the FBI had succeeded in exposing Martin Luther King Jr.? The FBI bugs of King's home and hotel rooms had become common knowledge in newsrooms around the country. But here's the thing, no one printed a word of it." Are you getting this? This article in the Washington Post is saying, isn't it so wonderful that when the FBI delivered all this smut that Martin Luther King Jr. was into to the media and said, hey, you need to expose this guy that everybody's looking up to as a great leader for the filthy pervert that he is, no one in the media would print a word of it. Now, it's not because they respected the personal lives. No, you know what it was? They were receiving orders not to print it. Because the media is controlled. Because the media is not a free press, that's why. Because they were being controlled and they were not allowed to print it. That's what's really going on. But this guy says he was saved from ignominy. No, he wasn't. Just because people don't know about it, God knows about it. And in 2014, everybody now knows about it. He was preserved for greatness. Not in my book. I don't think that a filthy pervert and a false prophet is a great man for 1 second. The article goes on to say, I can't help wondering what would have happened if King would have been exposed at the time. The cries of hypocrisy would have blighted the sun. A minister, a civil rights leader, a married man, a father. Yeah, those are good questions. Why is this man such a hypocrite? The result would be the hideous destruction of a great man. How can you destroy a great man just by shining the light on the fact that he is committing adultery with prostitutes in every place? Well, I just don't think any of that's true. That's just a bunch of scuttlebutt. Right. Yeah, the Washington Post, the New York Times, the FBI, the Senate, they're all just creating this elaborate conspiracy theory. No, even his friends admitted it. Listen to this. Ralph David Abernathy, which is one of his fellow reverends that he ran with. He said in his 1989 autobiography, And the Walls Come Tumbling Down, that Martin Luther King engaged in extramarital affairs, evidence of which was sometimes recorded by the FBI through hotel room bugs. This is his buddy in the civil rights movement, Reverend Ralph Abernathy. Here's a quote from his book. I remember in particular a stay at the Willard Hotel in Washington, where they not only put in audio receivers, but video equipment as well. Then after collecting enough of this evidence to be useful, they began to distribute it to reporters, law officers, and other people in a position to hurt us. Finally, when no one would do Hoover's dirty work for him, someone in the FBI put together a tape of highly intimate moments and sent them to Martin. Unfortunately, and perhaps this was deliberate, his wife Coretta received the tape and played it first. Such accusations never seemed to touch her. She rose above all the petty attempts to damage their marriage by refusing to even entertain such thoughts. Right, just those petty attempts. Those petty attempts to hurt someone's marriage, like when you send them a cassette tape of their husband committing adultery with hundreds of different people in hotel rooms across America. Just little stuff like that doesn't really matter anyway. She didn't let little stuff like that get her down. What a wonderful wife. I mean, what in the... sometimes I feel like I'm living in the Twilight Zone. Now, you might ask yourself, as I'm preaching this sermon, why was the FBI eavesdropping on Martin Luther King Jr.? And the answer is because of him being connected with communists.
Civil rights activist Bayard Rustin served as King's main advisor and mentor in the late 1950s. He had joined the Young Communist League in 1936 and continued working with the Communist Party USA until the early 1940s. Following directions from the Soviet Union, the Communist Party USA and its members were active in the civil rights movement for African Americans. Following Stalin's theory of nationalism, the Communist Party USA, or CPUSA, once favored the creation of a separate nation for blacks to be located in the south of the United States. However, after 1941, when Germany invaded the Soviet Union, Joseph Stalin ordered the CPUSA to abandon civil rights work and focus on getting the U.S. to enter World War II. Disillusioned, Rustin began working with members of the Socialist Party instead. Rustin was a homosexual who was arrested in Pasadena in 1953 for committing sodomy in a car with two other men. He pleaded guilty to the crime of sex perversion and served 60 days in jail as a punishment.
Now, those were the good old days when sodomy was a crime. In 1953, even in California, he was arrested for sodomy. And notice, he was an advisor and mentor. He was the main advisor and mentor to Martin Luther King Jr. in the late 50s. When was he arrested and convicted of sodomy? In the early 50s. When is he the main advisor and mentor of Martin Luther King Jr.? In the late 50s. So Martin Luther King Jr. has with him this known former communist and homosexual as his main mentor and advisor in the Southern Christian Leadership Conference.